So hello everyone, welcome to our TARGETjobs Undergraduate of the Year webinar. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. My name is Imogen and I work in TARGETjobs in the Undergraduate of the Year team. So I'm going to be running today's session and I've got 4 people on the panel with me today, which I will introduce later. But first, I just wanted to give you a quick introduction to the Undergraduate of the Year Awards, just in case anyone listening perhaps doesn't know as much. So the Undergraduate of the Year Awards is an annual competition that TARGETjobs runs with award partners, and we search UK universities for the best students. So this year we have 9 different categories that students can apply to, and as the winner you'll then get a lovely prize from one of our award partners. So this year, for example, some of them are Rolls-Royce or HSBC and L'Oreal, and they sponsor the awards and offer a great prize for the winner and sometimes experiences for other finalists too. So it's something you don't want to miss out on. And we'll talk a bit more about the application process throughout this call, but it's essentially starts off through our website, and you have to answer some questions and do some online testing. And then if you make it to the next stage, you then attend assessment centres and interviews with the award partners. So as I said, we'll cover a bit more about that later, and these guys will tell you about their own experiences. So if you do have any questions as we go along, feel free to pop them in the chat, which should appear along the right-hand side of your screen, and we'll get through as many as we can. Hopefully we may answer some as we're going along anyway, but feel free to pop them in the chat. Now, so without further ado, I will let the panelists introduce themselves. So maybe if we start with Luca, as I know he's been running our TARGETjobs Instagram page today. So over to you, Luca.
So hi everyone, thank you for joining. My name is Luca and I'm a second-year economics student at Durham University. I was last year's winner of the Male Undergraduate of the Year Award, which was sponsored by L'Oreal. Obviously now that's the Sustainable Thinking Award, which has a similar prize to what I was able to enjoy last year, and that was a 10-week placement with L'Oreal last summer.
Thank you. And Rachel?
Hi everyone, I'm Rachel Breeze. So I was the top 10 finalists for the Management Undergraduate of the Year last year, and that award was sponsored by Enterprise. I'm currently in my 2nd year studying business and management at Durham University, and I also work for Enterprise as a campus brand manager for this year.
Thank you. And if we head over to Will now.
Hi everyone, I'm Will. I'm at Lancaster University. I'm in my 3rd year. I won the First Generation Award last year, which was sponsored by HSBC UK, and I'm currently a brand ambassador.
Wonderful, thank you. And finally, Zareen, who you may have seen on our Instagram page yesterday.
Hi everyone. Hello again for those of you who watched the story yesterday. My name is Zareen. I recently graduated from the University of Cambridge studying human social and political sciences, and I won the LGBT Undergraduate of the Year Award last year, which was sponsored by Clifford Chance.
Wonderful, thank you. Well, I'm really glad that you could all join me today. I'm excited to hear all about your experiences, and hopefully this will inspire some of the students on the call today who are listening to maybe think about putting in an application themselves for this year's awards. So if we make a start, maybe talking a little bit first about your kind of university experience before you thought about applying to the awards. So if we maybe start with Rachel, could you kind of tell us a bit about why you perhaps chose Durham University and why you decided to choose your degree subject as well?
Yeah, of course. So I've always been fascinated with how businesses operate. And I think a business degree really provides you with industry insights, so such as market trends and industry reports. I think it helps develop a variety of skills such as project management, critical and strategic thinking, and communication. And a massive bonus is that you can apply your academic theory to real life business situations in your future careers. I chose Durham because it's a beautiful university. The grounds are lovely. And it's a collegiate system, so that really made me get involved with all the extracurricular activities that they hold.
Wonderful, thank you. And how about you, Zareen? I think you may have spoken a little bit about it yesterday about why you chose your degree, but for those who perhaps weren't watching, could you just let us know?
Sure. So I initially chose my degree. Please forgive me if there's background noise, by the way. I initially chose my degree because it's really broad, and I fancied myself after A levels. I had initially planned to go to an American university, which I was admitted into Brown University, and I initially planned to go there because the curriculum is so broad. But applying to UK universities, I really wanted something that mirrored that, and I kind of just stumbled upon human, social, and political sciences, which includes sociology, politics, international relations, and social anthropology. So that was why I went for that subject, and that was also why I went for Cambridge, because it's such a unique course to Cambridge. I was the first person from my school to get into Oxbridge, so I didn't have much experience there, but because of that course, that's why I applied, and that's why I went there.
Wow, that sounds really, really interesting. Thank you. And if we maybe move on to Will, I know, so Will's in his final year at the moment. So if he maybe can cast his mind back to when he first started, why did you apply for Lancaster?
Going to uni, I didn't really know what I wanted to do afterwards. History is quite a broad subject, and it doesn't kind of shoehorn you into a certain area. There's lots of kind of translatable skills as well. The reason I picked Lancaster, probably mainly because of the sporting here. It has a brand new gym, new pool, and that's probably what I spend most of the time at uni doing. I'm in the swimming team here, and we compete quite a lot here. That was probably the main reason for actually choice, really. It was here between several unis, but it's something over the edge.
Yeah, that's interesting. And a lot of students kind of choose unis for different reasons. Some perhaps because of the extracurricular kind of facilities that there are, like sports, or some go because of particular subjects, or because they just love the city. And how about you, Luca?
Yeah, so I mean, as I said, it was Durham University for me. I mean, the reason why I picked Durham, there's many reasons, but I guess at the time I was lucky enough to visit the campus and kind of visit the town, and kind of like how Rachel said, it's so beautiful, and similar to how Will said as well, I was really interested in pursuing sport at uni too, so I really enjoy rowing, and I was aware that Durham had quite a good rowing scene. Also, of course, not to mention economics at Durham University is kind of really well esteemed, and definitely had modules which I was interested in. So it was a lot of reasons really, but yeah, I guess possibly the biggest one was probably because of the economics, but also because of the sport.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone, for that. That was interesting. So now if we move on a little bit now to the actual awards. So students hear about the awards through a variety of ways, hopefully. So we obviously do a lot of marketing our side from TARGETjobs, and we work with the unis quite closely to promote the awards, because university lecturers and careers services obviously want to give their students as many opportunities as they can, and this is a really great one for students to get involved with. So if we go over to Zareen, I wondered if you could perhaps kind of let us know why you were inspired to apply for this award, why you thought, oh, I'll give it a go.
Sure. So I definitely stumbled across the award, I think, in my career service emails, and I kind of went for it because I was heavily involved in Society for BME LGBTQ people at my university. I was the first president of that society, and I was just really proud of the work that my team, my committee, and myself had done, and I thought that the award seemed like a really interesting opportunity to talk about that work and possibly get it onto a larger platform, but as well a really good opportunity for professional development, considering that the sponsor of the award was Clifford Chance, and that I had never really considered law, but it seemed like a really opportune inroad for law. So that's why I was super kind of excited to apply, because of the work I'd done and because of the opportunities that the award afforded.
Yeah, it's a great way for you to kind of showcase your skills and experiences and activities and stuff that you've worked on beforehand, to try and get your name out there a bit more, and yeah, to see what sort of opportunities it could lead to. So Rachel, could you perhaps tell us a bit about your reasoning for applying as well, and maybe kind of how did you decide which award to apply to? When you did apply to the management one, were you kind of thinking about maybe going for one of the other categories, or did you just know straight away that you wanted to go for the enterprise award?
So yeah, I attended a jobs fair and signed up for correspondence from TARGETjobs. And I remember it so vividly, sitting in my university room one evening and receiving the email. And I don't know why, I just didn't think, I was going to get very far with it. And I thought, why not? So I was like, I love a challenge. So I kind of just applied. I applied specifically for the management one, as I am interested in a future career in management, and it does align with my degree choice. And I did have previous work experience that kind of led towards management. I spent a lot of time researching the different award partners as well. So personally, I think it's important to work for a company which shares similar values to yourself. And Enterprise was the company that was sponsoring the management one. And I was very impressed by Enterprise, as they were recognised as the Times top 50 employer for women. And personally, I want to work in an environment where women can thrive. Additionally, they've been nominated a number of times for Best Diversity Recruiter. So that was a major consideration that I took into account when I applied for the Management Award.
That's really good, and I like your point about it's important that you align with the values of the company, because that's one thing I've said to a lot of students who've been asking me, like, how do I decide which award to apply to? I've said, make sure you do your research of the different award companies and see which ones you're the most interested in, and if there's any projects that leap out at you, or again looking at their values and company initiatives and things to see what fits with you. So that's really interesting, thank you. And Luca, I know you were in your first year when you applied, so can you tell us a bit about how you kind of managed to fit that in with still finding your feet at university? I don't know whether you just decided to do it on a whim, because maybe first year is not as heavy work-wise, but what inspired you to apply? And again, did you have to think about which award to apply to, or did you just know that the male category was the one for you?
Yeah, I mean, I touched a little bit about this on the Instagram page, but I only had 10 seconds, so it was a bit difficult to talk about it. But I think for me, I definitely came into the awards with the hope that I would be able to gain some experience of just a general recruitment process. So being in my first year, I knew that it's really, really important to kind of prepare for the graduate scene when you are leaving uni, but also I'm kind of going for a placement year. So as well, I knew it would be great to get some experience just with a kind of leading company and experiencing what their recruitment process is like. So that kind of drove me initially to give it a go. I definitely didn't think it would go anywhere near as far as it did. So I think that really motivated me just to kind of see what that would be like in my first year. I mean, in terms of why I picked that award or what award I considered, I mean, I looked at every single one. I knew that I wanted to kind of be open-minded with them and just think, okay, I know I have interest, but equally, let's look at it from kind of like an easy perspective of just thinking which one is right for me. I looked through all of them, and all of them were so kind of enticing, and it's kind of frustrating how you can't apply for multiple in that
I get
sense.
that question a lot.
But it's definitely was a good thing when I kind of found the L'Oreal one. I think, like Rachel said, I identified with the company. My passion grew as I explored them even more, and it just got to the point where I knew I needed to apply. So that's kind of what took the final decision for me.
Great, thank you. And Zareen, can you explain a bit about if you did kind of lots of research into Clifford Chance and the other sponsors of your awards, and how you kind of decided to apply for that as well?
Sure. In terms of research, I definitely did, largely because I agree. I think it's important to understand the values that your sponsor, your kind of the sponsor's values are, what they are, and if they align to yours. And I definitely found that to be the case. The work that Clifford Chance has done with LGBTQ communities, BME communities, with movements like the Black Lives Matter movement has been really important for me and aligned with the interests and values that I had. But as well as that, I kind of, didn't want to go in blind. I come from a non-law background, and I was very aware I didn't know much about it. And this isn't to say I kind of tried to become a lawyer overnight, but I did learn about practice areas, what potentially I could be interested in. So I did a bit of that before I applied. And I encourage anyone to do that because it helps steer some of your answers for some of the potential questions you may have in your application. So that's kind of in terms of what research that I did. And in terms of what has inspired me to apply for that particular award, I also looked through every single award to see what was right for me. But I think because I'm so passionate about the LGBT community, but the BME, LGBTQ people who are kind of minority within the minority, that seemed like a good platform for me to really talk about that issue.
Yeah, that's really good. So one of the questions we've had today was actually, do you have to be interested in law to apply to any of the Clifford Chance Awards? Because Clifford Chance are sponsoring the LGBT plus one, which Zareen won last year, but also we have a Young Activist of the Year, which they are sponsoring as well. So as you've said, you don't necessarily have to be looking at a career in law to apply for that, but you definitely need to do your research around it and show a bit of an interest, because at the end of the day, it is a law firm that is sponsoring it. So as you said, you don't have to become a lawyer overnight, but definitely need to do your research and find something that interests you about it. Because then it gives you something to talk about in your application, and then further down the line, if you did make it to interviews. So one of our biggest questions so far that we've had a lot of students show an interest in, and I think I've mentioned this to a few of you when I've spoken to you guys beforehand. Did any of you think that you would make it into the top 10 or to become a winner? I can see you're all smiling at me because I know the answer. So maybe if we start off with Rachel, could you kind of explain, like, did you ever think you would make it to the top 10? How did it feel to be kind of told that you were going to be in the final?
Yeah, I was surprised. I was like happy surprised. It wasn't like, oh gosh, they've got the wrong person, but it was like, wow, you know, for the work and the effort I put in has really, it's really given me an output. I think the hardest part of it was finding the confidence to apply. I always find people self-doubt themselves and they think they need to be this supernatural being who is a massive overachiever. But once you find the confidence to apply, you've really done the hardest part. And the next step is just to show them that you are the right candidate. So yeah, I was very surprised that I got through. But I think, you know, if you put some effort in and kind of prove that you're the right candidate, you've got a good chance.
Wonderful. Will, do you have anything to add in terms of when you made it to the final and then you were announced as the winner of the award?
Kind of a shock that I got through to the next stage. Each part I was trying to do my best. It was at the assessment centre. I went to the HQing for HSBC, and I thought, in this massive grand building with all these high achievers, there's no chance really. But then when my name got called out, it was kind of a shock really. Didn't think it for a second. But again, like, it's kind of set the next 2-3 years of my life up completely through an internship, then offered a grad role, being an ambassador at the moment. It's really really helped that initial first stages of your life post-uni.
Yeah, so it's just having that confidence to take the initial first step and actually make an account on the website and start filling in your details and think, okay, I'm actually going to apply, and like, you never know where it could take you. So talking of that first website bit, actually, if we maybe talk a little bit about the first part of the application process. So for everyone listening, when you've started and made an account on the Undergraduate of the Year website and you've put in a few basic details and kind of education background, you then will have a question or some questions that are set by the award partner who sponsors the awards. And you need to answer those as best you can. You don't have a particular time limit for it or anything other than the deadline, which is on the 1st. So we normally encourage you to maybe copy and paste the answers, then log out of the system, work on it for a couple of days, and then go back into it. So do you guys have any advice for students when they're preparing the questions? So one thing I would normally advise is to make sure someone else reads over it after you've put it together, just to get a fresh pair of eyes on it. But Luca, would you perhaps have any other advice or hints and tips that you can remember from when you were writing the answer to your question that was set by L'Oreal?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I was lucky in the sense that I just had one question, and I'm pretty sure some awards can have multiple. But I know that was daunting enough, and I actually think that perhaps that was one of the hardest parts of the application. And it's quite a big hurdle to get over, because I kind of saw the question and it almost put me off applying, because I just didn't know what to write. I just had this block, and I thought, I'm trying to reach this big thing. The end goal is to win, kind of in my eyes, but I kind of really doubted whether or not that was possible. But I think one piece of advice I would have, and it's something that kind of my parents said to me, was just type, like just literally type on your computer, just get some words down and just restructure it how you'd like to. It's not really about getting it perfect as well, but as you start writing, you'll find ways to adjust it, you'll find ways to change it. It's so kind of hard to look and think, oh, I've got to write 500 words. But if you look and think, oh, I've just got to write some words and I can expand on this and I can talk about that and then I can change this and do this, then that makes it so much more kind of manageable. So I think for me, my advice would be, don't be kind of put off by what might seem like quite a significant thing to complete. It actually, once you get writing, is really enjoyable to reflect on some experiences you might not have ever really associated with that question. So I definitely think, just think back about what you've done. And also, I'm talking a lot, but one more thing is, I think write a little list of things you would like to talk about. So just think about the question and think about what you've achieved, what you've done in the past. Make a big list of what you think you could write about, and then just kind of sort through and think which one you like the most. I mean, for my question, I ended up talking about sport, which wasn't really something I would have associated with innovation or changing a process. But with enough thought and enough reflection, you can really make anything apply. And I think that's really important to consider that. So
Yeah, so the key is to just kind of put the effort into it and kind of give it the time and effort it deserves. I know from speaking to some of the other winners and finalists from last year that a lot of you treated it like a job application in itself. So you gave it enough time and thought and made sure that you set aside specific kind of times of day to work on it, which is really good, so that, you know, you've got enough time and effort to spend on it. Zareen, do you have anything to add? Because I think for the Clifford Chance one, I think you may have had more than one question to answer.
Yeah, there were multiple questions for chance. I think there was around 4, and they were all really different. And I definitely suffer from last minute itis. If things can be very out of sight, out of mind for me, especially because my degree had very glaring deadlines. So I definitely was aware that if I didn't kind of make the conscious effort to work on the questions consistently, then I might miss the deadline. So for anyone who also has that issue, what I did was I kind of wrote out the questions and I stuck them around my uni room. So it meant that I had to see them every single day, but it also meant that the ideas I had were kind of ticking along across the days. And if I thought about something, I'd jot it down, which meant that, you know, Luca, you were mentioning, it can be scary, right, to start a question. I'd kind of already started it a couple days before, a week before. It was easier to just...
Oh, is she frozen for you guys as well?
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, well, maybe give her a couple of minutes. Okay, so one of the questions that we've had in the chat as well, actually, I'm going to direct this one to Rachel. So someone has asked, if you're unsuccessful this year, can you apply, or if you're successful or unsuccessful this year, can you apply again next year? So I know that Rachel was in our top 10 for the management awards last year for our 2021 awards, and then she has actually applied again this year to one of our different awards. So can you just explain a little bit of your mindset behind that, and maybe why you decided to apply again and why you picked a different category?
Yeah, of course. So yeah, you can definitely apply if you're successful or unsuccessful for the next year. I just really liked the process. I thought everyone I met was really friendly. I thought it was a great opportunity to experience a graduate recruitment selection process and attend, you know, a phone interview, assessment centre, meet other like-minded people. So yeah, I've applied again. I'm going to give it another shot. So fingers crossed. And I've applied for a different award. It's for the first generation. So I did have a little brief look at all of them, and that was kind of the one that I thought I had the best shot in. So fingers crossed.
That sounds good, thank you. Oh, we've got Zareen back, wonderful.
Sorry.
No worries at all, it happens, don't be silly. So we were just talking about how if candidates were unsuccessful or successful, that they can actually apply again the following year. So obviously if you meet the different eligibility criteria for different awards, then you can enter different categories. So kind of along similar lines, if you guys could apply again, would you do anything differently next time round? So would you, whether that's approaching the questions differently or something that you perhaps would do differently at an assessment centre or an interview, or maybe there's a mistake you made that you won't make again, whether that's with this or with other job applications. So if we maybe go to Will, is there anything that you've particularly learned that you would do differently?
Of the application process, it was the video interview for my one, which I had real problems with. So going back, I would have looked at kind of what was coming up, and I'd do practice ones, or I'd find them. And I think a lot of uni teams have kind of practice interviews or practice psychometric tests, and I'll definitely be doing them to kind of well, not just be doing it for the first time ever within the environment. I'd have like a practice run through first, definitely.
That's a good point. Yeah, and I think on our TARGETjobs website, actually, we've got a link with Shortlist Me, which is a practice interview platform. So any students listening, you should be able to find that through our site, and that's really good. I actually trialed it myself, and you basically just answer questions that they set, and you can watch yourself back, see how you appear on a video interview, see what things you say, and if you would reword it. So I think that's really important. Thank you. Luca, is there anything that you would perhaps do differently next time round if you were to apply again?
I think one thing for me is during my assessment centre, one of the things we had to do was prepare a presentation about sustainability. And that was what we presented to a senior brand manager. And I mean, it's kind of embarrassing to say, but I reached the end of this amazing presentation. I spent so much time on it. And the assessor actually said to me, okay, but what about sustainability? What I really focused on was kind of the environmental impact, but I didn't really think about kind of the sustainable element of it. So I think one piece of advice I would have, I guess one thing I do differently is really make sure that you do kind of think broadly on your topic. They're not expecting the depth that you kind of might expect from yourself. It's really important to just think broadly, be open-minded to whatever the question is or whatever the recruitment processes are. And also another piece of advice, because I say I do that differently, but equally, I was really receptive to what the assessor said. So when they said, okay, what about sustainability? I responded. So I think whilst I might do it differently now to make it perfect, it's absolutely fine if it doesn't end up being perfect. And it's really, really important to be able to adapt in those situations and show that you're willing and able to respond to kind of little, I guess, what's the word, constructive criticisms. So I guess that's my advice for that.
Wonderful, thank you. Yeah, I think being open-minded and quite flexible with things is really key, especially at the moment, because normal life, you have to be more flexible and adaptable these days. So I think just, keeping an open mind and knowing that things might change and you might kind of take a bit of criticism is really important as well. So moving on to another question we've had. So the second stage of the application, once you've answered your questions and submitted those, is then the psychometric testing, which people either seem to love or hate. So if we maybe talk a bit about that, one of the students has asked if you've got any tips for taking those tests online. So the number of tests does depend on the award that you apply to. So for some, you only have to do 1. For some, you have to do 4. So if we maybe start with Zareen, if you could perhaps give us a quick overview, if you can remember, of the psychometric test that you did, and was there any particular practice that you did beforehand, and kind of how did you manage it when you were actually taking the tests?
Sure. So the test I did was the Watson-Glaser test, which is a critical thinking test that law firms use to assess candidates. I had no idea what it was beforehand, absolutely none. And I spoke to a few of my lawyer friends who said that it's kind of like the bane of their existence and things like that. So, okay, fine. But really the only advice I can give is to practice. The good thing about tests like that is there's so many online, and your career service should have some type of access to practice tests. So give yourself as much time as you can. I think giving myself, I think maybe like a week or maybe 2 weeks to practice across every other day or so was really helpful, because it meant when it came to the real thing, I wasn't super daunted. I definitely could have been if I hadn't practiced or if I hadn't asked my friends, like, what is this about? So that's a really basic tip, but just definitely practice, give yourself enough time, and it's not as scary as you think once you kind of acclimatize to it.
Yeah, and I think you've made a good point about university career services as well. A lot of them will have access to sites where you can practice online testing, and they also will be able to help you with looking over your questions as well. So in the same way that they would be able to support you if you were putting together a CV, which you don't actually need for the undergrad, but obviously you would for other jobs, they will be able to help you if you need inspiration on where to begin, or if you just want them to proofread it instead. Definitely make the most of your career services if you can. And we have loads of resources on the TARGETjobs website as well. Again, I think we have access to psychometric testing practice, so make the most of it, and definitely time is key. Kind of give yourself enough time, try not to rush it, and then it gives you more time to think about everything as you're going along with it. So we've actually got a question for Zareen. So how has winning the Clifford Chance Award impacted what you're doing now? So are you thinking perhaps a longer term career with them? I know you're working for a charity at the moment, but how do you think it will impact your future?
Sure. So it's had a major impact, far more than I thought. I'm now thinking about corporate law as a career in a way that I absolutely hadn't before the award, like not even remotely, because of the insights that I've gotten from the prize. So access to the virtual vacation scheme, people who work for Clifford Chance who I've spoken to. It's definitely been a huge source of inspiration for me in terms of kind of a professional development kind of route. But as well as that, just winning the prize and being in contact with Clifford Chance has had some really positive experiences. So I was able to have a feature on Attitude magazine, which is Europe's largest LGBTQ magazine, and that was fantastic. I only found out through Instagram. They didn't tell me, but it was it was a great surprise. And so that was good because actually I spoke about that at work. So I work for an educational charity and I spoke about that today. So that's kind of fed into other conversations. But yeah, the winning the award has been really positive for professional development and otherwise.
Yeah, it's great to hear how something that starts off as such a small thing, when you just kind of start your questions and do the testing and then don't think about it for a month, it then has such a big impact from things like that and featuring in the magazine to then Will being offered a graduate job with the company. It's strange how a really positive change, how it can change your future career. So now if we perhaps move on to talk about the bit of the application process that's after the psychometric testing. So for everyone listening, for this year's awards, the deadline to finish all of the questions and the psychometric testing is the 1st of February. And then by the 1st of March, you'll hear from us as to whether you've made it through to the next stage, which is run by the award partner themselves. So for the majority, that will involve an assessment centre or an interview, or maybe both. So we maybe talk a bit about how things have been impacted by COVID in terms of this as well, and how a lot was run virtually. So Rachel, could you perhaps tell us a bit about your management experience? So when you got through to the next stage and they kind of took over the recruitment process, can you tell us a bit about that and how you found it, and if it was impacted and you perhaps had to do it from home instead?
Yeah, so was this last year when we got through to the process? Yeah. So the next step for me was to be invited to an assessment centre. So completing my application, which was essay style questions and online tests. And once passing that stage, I was invited to participate in a telephone interview. Once I was through to the next round, it was an assessment day at their office in London. And that involved preparing a group pitch, conducting a boardroom meeting, and a competency-based interview. All were very scary on the day, but kind of once you affiliated yourself there, everyone was super friendly, and that's the employer and also the other people that you're there competing against. Once that was finished, it was impacted by COVID because I remember we were supposed to get the results back a couple of months, maybe like 2 months afterwards, but we actually didn't find out for about 8 or 9 months after, just because obviously they didn't know when the award ceremony was going to be held, and obviously that was slightly frustrating because the people I met there were lovely. We started a group chat on LinkedIn. We still keep in touch to give each other like networking opportunities and things, but we were all kind of like, has anyone won? Does anyone know yet? Like, when's it going to happen? So that was impacted by COVID, but only slightly. I know this year obviously everything will be online, so that will be a massive difference, but I'm sure they've planned for that.
Yeah, so obviously we know it's a shame we had to push back the award ceremony, and then luckily we were still able to do it virtually. It's obviously a shame we couldn't do it in person, but so many things were changed last year. I'm sure everyone understands that at least we got to do something, and we still had Rachel Riley do part of her presentation, which was really exciting for everyone as well. So Luca, could you perhaps talk a little bit about your assessment centre experience with L'Oreal and how that all worked?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I was kind of very lucky because my assessment centre wasn't affected by COVID, thankfully. I mean, back at that time, it's insane to look back. It feels like 7 years ago now. But back at that time, the only advice we were given is sanitize your hands on the way into the building. So obviously it's very different to how it is now. But yeah, it was a really great experience. It was a long experience, definitely, but it was nothing but enjoyable. It definitely took a lot out of me. I'm sure everyone else's assessment centres were the same. You leave and it's this different kind of tiredness. You don't feel like physically tired, you just feel mentally tired, and so much has been taken from your brain, and it's just so kind of difficult in that sense, but also just so enjoyable. It was a real challenge, and I really rose to that, I think, and it was a new experience for me. So definitely it was really, really enjoyable, some really great components. And like how Rachel said as well, I was lucky enough to meet so many amazing people who I'm still in contact with now. So yeah, really great experience overall.
That's good. And I think from speaking to a lot of you, you said that the assessment centre point was the hardest bit of the process, but also the most enjoyable. And like you say, Luca, you're kind of running on adrenaline all day. I know from doing a couple myself that you're just kind of so focused on everything, even though you are kind of sat down for most of the day, you just finish and you just then realise how mentally drained you are. But it's really good because you get to showcase all of your skills and your talents and meet all these wonderful people. And it's great to hear that some of you are still in touch with them as well, because that's really good. And that's what we want the awards to be about, so that you guys can kind of expand your networks and your friendships as well, which is really good. So we've had another question from a student that's, do you have any advice for students who perhaps haven't got as much work experience or extracurricular activities on their CV? Kind of what advice could you give to them when they're doing the application? So what other bits of experience can they draw on to try and bulk up their applications and kind of demonstrate their skills? So maybe if we go to Zareen for this first.
Sure. So I do think that if you don't have as much kind of work experience or extracurricular activities, I don't think that's necessarily prescriptive in how you can apply for the award or what you talk about. I would encourage you to kind of look through the experiences you do have and places that you have shown, I don't know, for example, determination or passion, etc. And that can be so many different things. That could be a part-time job you've had where you've had to deal with a difficult situation with a customer and you've shown kind of resilience and conflict resolution. It could be, for example, I look after my brother at home, and that can be quite challenging, and that's something I'm passionate about and I care about. So I really wouldn't underestimate your personal experiences and the value that they have and how they speak to you as a person. Definitely, I've known kind of candidates for the award who have drawn on personal experiences rather than kind of extracurricular things or work experience. So please don't undervalue them. They are really, really important.
Yeah, I think it's easy for you to compare yourselves to these guys who are on the call today and anyone else you might know who has got work experience. And it's the important thing is like the award partners want to know you as a person as well. They want to know kind of what experience you do have, and just have to draw on anything, even if it is things like demonstrating teamwork from group exercises at university. That still counts. That's still really important. So drawing on even what maybe is viewed as a kind of smaller bit of experience is really important. So don't kind of put yourself down if you think, oh, I haven't had a proper part-time job for a while, or I'm not in a society at university. That doesn't stop you from applying at all.
Can I, sorry,
yeah,
I just wanted to add to that actually, because I really sympathise with those who are in their first year or even maybe their second, who maybe because of the COVID situation haven't really had the opportunity to explore extracurricular that they would have ordinarily wanted to. So I think what's also really important is, I think any company would value, or any of the partners for these awards would value a candidate that says what they would have liked to have done, or speak about the potential they hope to one day realise. So I think definitely don't let a lack of extracurricular kind of put you off, because everyone's had to deal with that. I mean, I'm a rower, but I haven't rowed for like 8 months now. But I think speaking about what you look forward to doing, speaking optimistically about the future, can only be a good thing. So I just wanted to say that, because I definitely feel bad for those who might think that it's a disadvantage to not have much to talk about.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point in terms of kind of the world has been flipped a bit upside down and things are very different. So if you haven't been able to do as much as you would have liked at university, then everyone else is in the same situation. So it's not something to think you can miss out because of that. So another question I've had, so how many people apply on average? So last year for the awards, we had 13 different categories, and I think we had about 4,500 students apply. So this year, obviously, we haven't closed yet, so we're not 100% sure of our final numbers, but we do have a fair few students, but it is students like these guys here that are able to win or become finalists. So don't let that big number scare you at all. There's lots of students that are definitely kind of eligible for these awards, and we want to hear from all of you because you never know where this experience could take you. So now if we talk a little bit about the virtual awards ceremony, and we've kind of touched on it a bit, like, did you guys ever think you would win? But can a couple of you maybe just kind of say what it felt like to be at the ceremony and kind of how it felt, even though it was virtual? I know you guys got to network beforehand, so did you speak to any of the finalists in the different award categories, and did you kind of learn anything from them? So maybe if we start with Rachel.
Yeah, sure. So I was just in my group for the management awards, but it was really nice because obviously you'd met a couple of people at the assessment centres. So I know with Enterprise, they split us into, I think it was at least 2 different days, and I think it was 2 different time slots. So it was really cool to kind of be put back into the, at the virtual ceremony, be put back into a group and see someone that you saw in your assessment centre and kind of, you know, just smile and congratulate them for getting this far. Although I didn't win, it was really nice to obviously speak to the winner as well. And kind of congratulate her, and you kind of realise then and there, you know, that she also had so much experience, and she really deserved to win. So yeah, I think it was really nice that although it wasn't face to face, that didn't really impair any sort of networking.
That's good to hear. Will, do you have anything to add to that?
It was really good, yeah. I got to meet the winner of the Innovation Award as well. She was in my assessment centre back in Perth, and then I got to see her again during the ceremony. And it was quite a half day off work as well as a bonus. But yeah, it's really good, and I got to speak to people at HSBC as well afterwards. I reconnected with someone who had taken my, well, had part of my way back in March now. It's just an overall really good experience to talk to other people from awards as well, and I think it was about an hour at the end of it to move to other companies like you might be interested in as well, and that was really good as well.
Great, that's good to hear. And I know, Luca, I think you mentioned when I spoke to you that you actually got to be physically with some of the other finalists as well when you were watching the finals. Do you want to tell us a bit about your experience? I feel like it was slightly different to a lot of other people who were maybe sat at home watching it with their friends or family, but yours was slightly different.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, as I said, I completed a 10-week internship with L'Oreal. And another great thing about the awards is that it's not just the winners who always benefit, and I think we've touched on that, but there were 2 other finalists, and there's actually normally more, but because of the COVID situation, it was a little bit difficult for L'Oreal. But there were 2 other finalists who were also completing internships, and we were all lucky enough to be in the office on that day. So we reserved a conference room in L'Oreal. Top floor conference room, kind of had that out ourselves, just put it all up on the big screens and watched it all together, which was definitely an amazing experience and a unique one by the sounds of it too, because we were all able to be together and kind of celebrate that in person, which was incredible. So yeah, really it was different, but it was really nice. And even if I did watch it at home, the award ceremony was so kind of connected, even though it was obviously disconnected really and on kind of online, but it was still an amazing experience.
That's good. I'm glad. I think in some ways it worked well because I know you guys were able to share the kind of call link with more of your friends and family. So in some ways more people could share it with you than normal if it was in person. And I remember from speaking to one of the other winners, she said she was almost glad it was virtual because she had an ugly crying face on when her name was called out. So she was quite glad that she wasn't in a big room full of people and just with her family. So it's good to know that kind of worked and was still exciting and fun for you guys as well. So we've had another question from a student. So would you have any tips for them for when they have to talk about themselves? So when it comes to talking about extracurricular activities and achievements, do you have any advice on how to kind of put those sort of sentences together. So when I know I get it sometimes, you feel like you're kind of boasting about your achievements almost, but you need to get your kind of experience across. So Luca, do you perhaps have any advice for that?
Yeah, I mean, I think Zareen is an amazing example of this, and she said that in her takeover yesterday as well. It's just about having confidence. But I think as well, one thing I really kind of learned from the experience, and I'm about to answer the question on Instagram very soon, but someone asked what I've kind of taken away from this experience and how it's changed and adapted my kind of approach to applications now. And I think one thing that really kind of stands out for me is that I'm so much more open-minded now when it comes to applying for positions. And it's so important to be that way in every possible way. So to think about be open-minded in terms of how you approach the assessments, but also how you reflect on yourself and you talk about those experiences. Things kind of come up naturally in your mind, and it's important that you kind of try and make the connection with a quality that they're looking for. So I think that's really important to do that. And just as long as you kind of speak with confidence, you speak with the kind of knowledge that you have a lot to offer and that you are your own unique self, you can really express so much more than you might think you actually can, as long as you're open-minded to that.
Wonderful. And Zareen, do you have anything to add to that at all about kind of the confidence boost sort of thing?
Yeah, definitely agree with everything Luca said. I'm a big believer in self-confidence. I do really think that if you are answering a question about yourself and if you struggle to talk about yourself, one approach may be being structured about it. That may help. So I'm sure loads of people have heard of the STAR method, but if you're in this kind of interview setting and you want to talk about your achievements, using that kind of situation, task, I think action and result can really help kind of push away those feelings of modesty, etc., which I don't think serves anyone well in a situation like that. Please do big up yourselves, it's so important. But use that structure. I think it would really help, because at the end of the day, I personally don't think that, I think you should be your biggest supporter, your biggest champion. So do carry that through the application process.
That's really good advice, thank you. And I like your point about the STAR technique as well. Yeah, having some form of structure sometimes does help you if you don't really know where to start. At least it gives you a few bullet points, and then you can kind of then work out how to get it into sentences or paragraphs. So now if we talk a little bit more about kind of you guys post the awards. So how would you say that this experience has changed you? I don't know whether that would be in terms of increased confidence or maybe just a different attitude. So maybe if we went to Will, I know you have already secured your graduate role, which is really exciting. Well done. But if you did have another interview or an assessment centre coming up, do you think you would perhaps act a bit differently to how you did before the awards? Have you learned anything from this experience?
Yeah, definitely. I probably only started researching the company for the assessment centre process, where now definitely if you're applying for jobs, research from the very beginning, kind of learn about the ethos of companies and kind of if your values align with theirs as well. That's really important. I'd say it's definitely, the whole process made me a lot more focused as well. Maybe going through the internship as well, kind of actually understanding to get work done, it needs to be done in a certain way, it needs to be remain focused. That's helping in my final year as well at uni, especially with it all being online and stuff. But yeah, it's just in general even just helps kind of present a clearer image of how to do things in a professional working environment, I'd say.
Yeah, okay, that's really interesting. And Rachel, would you say that it's also kind of impacted the way you are as well? Now you're back at uni, so has it kind of changed perhaps the way you study? I know you were showing us earlier that you've got a really good list and you've got a lot coming up, so you kind of keep on track of it. So is that partly because of kind of having this experience alongside university last year?
Most definitely. I love a spreadsheet and a to-do list. I'd definitely say I'm much more confident, and it's really changed the way I look, as we were saying, at applying for different jobs. Like now I have this one template that I use for everything, and it's literally got like why I've applied for that specific position, what are my strengths in that position, what are my weaknesses. I even go so far as to have background knowledge on the interviewer through LinkedIn, just in case. So, you know, I think that it's definitely adapted me into being looking at things and researching it really thoroughly before I apply.
Yeah, that's really good. Thank you. Yeah, definitely good to be kind of prepared, and it sounds like it's kind of given you all a confidence boost, although I feel like Zareen maybe didn't need that because she's so good already. But yeah, it's good to kind of make you know that you can stand out and try and show how you stand out, and make you feel more comfortable doing that rather than feeling like you can't kind of talk about yourself. So that's really important. Thank you. So would you guys say that the undergrad of the year has kind of led to any other opportunities for you? So I know a couple of you have got grad jobs now, but maybe if we talk to Luca, has it kind of opened up any other experiences for you?
I mean, I think just with anything, it's another experience. It's another kind of thing for you to have behind you. It's another thing for you to talk about. And I found that this was so beneficial in everything that I've done moving forward. So as I said at the start, I'm on a placement year course, and I applied for upwards of 30 companies. And I don't think there was ever a video interview I did where I didn't talk about this, because it is just such a great thing to talk about. And it opens up an avenue for you to explore so many kind of areas of yourself. And in fact, the placement year which I accepted, in the final round interviews that I had, one of the bankers said to me, kind of, what is this? They had my CV in front of them, and one of their first questions was, what is this? And that was just such a nice thing to talk about. And it was such kind of an honor to be able to explain what it was to someone who had kind of an interest in it, and be able to explain how I achieved that, what I've learned from it, and reflect from that as well with them. And it was great to know that they were really interested in it. So I think it just allows even more for you to kind of explore areas of yourself, or for you to bring up an example of where you demonstrated various skills. So of course that's beneficial in anything I do in the future, and I imagine it will be even more so as I go forward as well.
Great. That was going to be one of my other questions as well. Like, have you been asked about this in an interview, or by, I don't know, any other conversation you may have had with a company or an employer or a university lecturer or something? Because I think most of you have got this on your LinkedIn, so it's obvious that you've been involved. So that's really good to know that you're kind of proud to talk about it as well. That's really interesting. So if we maybe move on now, we're going to be finishing in a few minutes. So maybe if we talk about advice now for the students that are watching. So if we start off with the kind of first part of the application process, we're talking about the questions and the psychometric testing. If maybe each of you could give us like one piece of advice. So whoever I ask first is going to get to choose everything, and then I'm sure the rest of you will have to think a bit more about it. So if we go to Will first, what would be kind of your one bit of advice for someone who perhaps is sitting down trying to answer their questions for their particular award?
I think we've all said this today, but just getting in the practice tests or giving it a go beforehand, and not making, let's say, the real one your first go at something. So I've probably taken the go-to answer there, but
yeah, no, that's fine. That's good advice. What about you, Zareen? What would your tip be?
I think along similar lines, give yourself loads of time, especially if you do feel like the questions, for example, are a bit daunting. Giving yourself that breathing room to have that kind of headspace to think through the questions is important. So just as much time as possible.
Wonderful. Yes, we encourage you to not, obviously you still have got a couple of weeks to get applications in, but we don't want anyone who's watching to leave it right until the last minute, because that might be a bit stressful for you, especially because there's so much university deadlines and exams going on at the moment. So yeah, giving yourself enough time is really key. So Rachel, if you could talk to someone who perhaps is thinking about applying to the Enterprise Award but hasn't quite started their application yet, what would you say to them?
I would say start by researching the company. That's what got me excited. I know it can seem quite daunting, filling out a whole application form. There's a lot of time involved, a lot of mental ability. But once you start researching the company, you kind of get excited about the opportunity that it might lead to. So I would say that's definitely something that I would give advice to if you haven't started yet. I have one piece of advice as well, which I find is like the most valuable thing, is look for guides on the company website. For example, when I was applying for Enterprise, they literally have 3 guides and they are titled tips for your assessment centre, tips on how to answer the phone interview questions, and tips on completing the application form. So I found them really useful, and also on the company website, it will tell you which quality and values they stand for. So if you find an exact example for each quality you're claiming to hold, I think that always really impresses the interviewer.
That's a really good point. Thank you. And yeah, because we have loads of information on our TARGETjobs website about how to pass assessment centres and interviews, but looking at the company sites is also a really, really good idea, because as Rachel said, they do have specific guides and information on how their recruitment processes work. So definitely make sure you check those out if you do make it through to the next stage. Luca, do you perhaps have anything to add to that? So if students are perhaps thinking about starting off their questions, what would you say to them?
Yeah, I mean, I think Rachel explained it really well, and I think it kind of connects with the advice I gave earlier, which is just start writing, like genuinely just start typing something down. And I think kind of taking the advice of Rachel there, I mean, I wish I did that back at the time, but I think it's so much easier to write something you're excited about. And whilst I was definitely excited about the prospect of kind of winning, there was a lot of self-doubt that was kind of clouding that a little bit. So I think what Rachel said about researching the company, find something that kind of you relate to in the company or its values, and think about what you could possibly be accessing if you do your application and you complete this question. It will just motivate you so heavily to try your best in it. So I think that's my advice. I think Rachel explained it really, really well. But I guess one more thing I would say is probably just literally start writing, just find some time and just start typing.
Yeah, basically just do it. Stop thinking about it and just do it. That's what one of our other finalists said. Just stop worrying, kind of think about the questions, go for it, and you never know what might happen. So now if we just quickly go around you guys again and do a similar sort of thing, but for the assessment centre. So things obviously this year will be slightly different, and I expect the majority of firms will be running their assessment centres virtually, but there's still likely to be an element of a group exercise, probably a one-to-one interview, and maybe some networking sessions. Who knows, it will depend how companies run them. But if you could give a student who was about to do a virtual assessment centre perhaps a piece of advice, what would you say to them? So if we start with Zareen for this one. So I know you've been working from home virtually.
Yeah, definitely. I think I would say prep for it like a normal interview. And by that, I think one of the core things to do is get used to speaking about yourself. We mentioned this earlier, but practice the type of questions that you might expect. A lot of the at least for Clifford Chance, some of the interview was those kind of normal interview questions. So tell me about a time you did this or that. And I think just getting into the swing of that really, really helps. Also helps in the networking stage when you are informally speaking to people. Being able to mention or give like a kind of small pitch of yourself will make you feel comfortable and at ease. So definitely just prep as normal, and hopefully being in a home environment can also, you know, set yourself at ease, get comfy, and do that preparation in advance.
Yeah, that's really good. Thank you. Will, do you have anything to add to that, maybe to help them prep for it?
I'd say your first point of call should be your university team, and see if they've got kind of a breakdown of what each kind of sector's assessment centre looks like. So with mine, they gave me an A4 document of literally what each stage will be, and it was pretty accurate, really, and that really kind of helped prepare me for what was coming up, which I had no idea because I've never done one before. So it kind of was that insight, and I got a bit of practice in as well.
Yeah, and I think it's okay for students, like if this was your first assessment centre, then that's fine, you've got to start somewhere. So just kind of doing as much prep for it as you can. And even people who have done lots of assessment centres still feel nervous beforehand, because you still, even though you think you know what's coming, you still don't completely know what to expect until you're actually in it. So Rachel, do you have like one kind of nugget of advice for a student who perhaps was about to kind of sit down and log on to a virtual interview maybe?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you mentioned earlier in the question that it was about like working together with a group, and obviously you've not met them on this virtual assessment centre before. So I do have one piece of valuable feedback that I received from my assessment centre. So basically, obviously, remember that in the group activities, you are part of the team. So you do get marked individually, but it's also how you work with the team. So I remember when we sat down for the group-based activity and we got the brief, we'd all read it and everyone started, and I kind of just asked everyone if everyone understood the brief. And in my feedback, that's what my sort of examiner said, that obviously showed leadership, because obviously, remember, it's not just you're in it. When you're doing a group-based activity, you need to think about the other people in the group. Although you haven't met them before, it's about making sure you're all on track, because it will save you time down the road when you guys, like, one person thinks you're working out a maths question, the other one thinks it's an English question. So just make sure you're really working with your team and kind of checking in with them, making sure that they're kind of they understand the brief as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I used to work in student engagement at a different firm before this. And we always used to say, you know, for assessment centres, yes, obviously get your own opinions and ideas across. But even just being the person that keeps an eye on the time or brings the conversation back on track will definitely get noticed, because it's clear that they're kind of keeping the bigger picture in mind and knowing that it's a team exercise. So that's really important. Then if we perhaps finish with Luca, do you have one extra bit of advice for a student who's perhaps doing something virtually?
Yeah, I think, I mean, look, from winning, I was lucky enough to sit down with the managing director of the consumer products division for L'Oreal. Obviously, this really high up man who's done so much to achieve the position that he's in, kind of very well looked up to in the company. And I said to him, kind of, what piece of advice would you give to me? And I remember at the time thinking, I'm not too sure about that advice. But now I look back and I think it's so true. He just said to me, as you grow older, you'll realize that you don't need to take things too seriously. And I think one of the kind of really daunting elements of assessment centres, if you Google them, or God forbid you go on Student Room, it's that people will tell you that it's really scary and it's really kind of, everyone's really serious and it's really all whatever. And I think when you get in that mindset, you might kind of start blocking your own personality. And I think it's really, really important that you don't let that happen. Be yourself, get your points across, be kind of assertive in who you are and what makes you happy, what you're optimistic about, what your opinion is. And don't let that stop you give your all to the assessment centre. Like, just literally be you, show your personality, get it across. And if the firm is the right company for you, then they'll love you for that. So obviously be professional, but I'm just saying it's definitely important to equally allow your true personality to shine through.
Yeah, completely agree. They want to know you as a person, and they don't necessarily just want you to give the answers that you think they want to hear. They want to actually know you and know what makes you passionate and what experience you've got. So that's a really good point. Thank you. Zareen, are you wanting to add something?
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly add, just on Luca's point, they really want you to do well as well. I think that's something people forget. They're not kind of these big bad bosses level. They really do want you to perform at your best, and they will help you to do that. So I think having that belief in yourself, but also having trust that the process is in good faith and wants to act in your interests as well, is really important, and hopefully will set people at ease.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. Yeah, they're not trying to catch you out. They want you to do well. So you just have to kind of be yourself and give it your all. Wonderful. Well, I think that draws us to a close on today's webinar. So thank you so much, Rachel, Will, Luca, and Zareen, for joining me. It's been really interesting to hear about your experiences, and it sounds like this has changed your kind of future a lot, which is really, really good for us to hear, and hopefully will have inspired a lot of students watching to either finish off the application or to start it today. And they've still got time. So the deadline isn't until the 1st of February. And if you do have any other questions after today, you can either get in touch via the TARGETjobs Instagram page, which I'm sure Luca will be heading back to now to answer some other questions, or you can email us at undergraduateoftheyear@targetjobs.com, and we'll be able to help you out. But thank you again. We've really enjoyed the call this afternoon. Thank you very much for joining, and have good evenings, everyone.